July 1961. The people of East Germany are undergoing through a violent identity crisis. Following the end of World War II, the Allied West and the Soviet bloc cannibalized the once united Germany. Plagued by a massive population exodus, the East German leadership was forced to build a deadly and an inescapable wall. And as this wall continued to claim hundreds of lives, a young man found its weakness and dared to escape. An escape so ingenious, it would be named the greatest escape of 1968. And so notorious, it would haunt him until the very end. This is the story of how one fearless college dropout managed to pierce the deadliest border on the planet. This is the story of Bernd Böttger. So, how did this young man break through the inescapable? And consequently, how did this single act of defiance haunt his life until the very end? To understand why this escape was an impossibility, we have to go back. 1961, Berlin, Germany. The citizens of East Germany are undergoing through an identity crisis, a confusion that threatens the country with a devastating economic fallout. You see, following the end of World War II, Germany was split into two different personalities. The capitalist West, led by the United States, France, and Britain, and the socialist East, controlled by the Soviet Union. While the US and the Soviet Union were once allies, their difference in political and economic ideologies would result in a fierce competition, one that would be later known as the Cold War. And in 1949, this friction ultimately carved the nation into two, leading to the formal creation of the Federal Republic of Germany in the West and the German Democratic Republic in the East. In just 15 years, the cost of this division became painfully clear as the two Germanys went to opposite directions. Supported by the Marshall Plan, a massive surge of financial aid from the US, the West entered a miracle of prosperity. Meanwhile, the East spiraled into an economic downhill. The Soviet Union didn't bring aid. Instead, they brought trucks, stripping the East of its factories as payment for war reparations. Opportunities vanished, and as a result, the young and educated East Germans began voting with their feet. And by 1960, the East had lost around 3 million people from desertion, almost 20% of its entire population. In short, East Germany was suffering from a massive brain drain. Thus, in 1952, desperate to stop this massive exodus, the East German leadership came up with a radical solution. A solution the world had never seen. They would build a wall. Not a wall to prevent invasion, but a wall to prevent its citizens from escaping. The wall, which is a part of what would be later known as the Iron Curtain. Now, the Iron Curtain is not your typical concrete border wall, but a multi-layer systems of control. The first layer is a 5-kilometer strip of land that one cannot access without special permit. The second layer are two parallel barriers filled with tripwires, landmines, and a narrow 10-meter strip of sand, an area where soldier guards were free to shoot anyone, the death strip. But the deadliest of them all, the third layer, which was not even a physical wall, but a group of people. East Germany's infamous secret police, the Stasi. A network of brutal intelligence officers spread across the country who profile and arrest citizens even before they thought of escaping. And on this night, August 13th, 1961, with the quick and secret establishment of the infamous Berlin Wall, the last line of connection between the East and West was finally sealed. For the government, any escape now was an impossibility. Or so they believed. Because in the quiet rural town of Sebnitz, a young man stared at these cage and found a wrinkle. And he knew exactly how to break the unbreakable. So, who was this man, and what weakness had he discovered in the Iron Curtain? His name was Bernd Böttger. Bernd was an eccentric 23-year-old college dropout and a free spirit who had a profound hatred for being told where he could and could not walk. After failing out of school, Bernd found himself working as a part-time lifeguard, and here is where he discovered a way to escape. He realized that while the GDR had turned the land into a high-tech cage, their wall had one place where it had not reached: the Baltic Sea. And his ingenious solution: he would swim. He would simply swim until he reached either of these countries. Yes, 20 to 60 kilometers of freezing water. You see, Bernd was not a marathon swimmer, nor a professional athlete, but he was one thing. At just the age of 17, he had already built a 3-stage solid fuel rocket, which almost accidentally hit a police station and landed him on the Stasi's watch list for teenage impunity. In other words, Bernd was a tinkerer, and his plan, he will build a torpedo. Not the explosive one you might be thinking, but this kind. These are called handheld diver propulsion vehicles, or in military terms, human torpedoes. They were primarily used by the military for secret naval missions, such as harbor infiltration and underwater sabotage. Of course, Bernd had no way of acquiring them, as they are military grade. And even if he could, they are not commercially available in the East. Worse, these are massive chunk of metals weighing up to 1,500 kilograms of lead-acid batteries, and capable only of covering a distance as far as 12 to 15 kilometers. Clearly, not enough. And so, Bernd improvised. Under the seclusion of his basement, he began to make something that would shock the world. He bought a second-hand 6-kilogram 1.5 horsepower Ingenious bicycle engine. Yes, an engine designed for mopeds. He then welded a propeller and sealed all the water-sensitive parts inside a plastic compartment. By using this bicycle motor, Bernd had created something revolutionary. In comparison to the battery models, his was 75 times lighter and had twice the power. However, this design had two massive flaws. First, the Ingenious engine's other name is the Rooster, and it was its name for a very specific reason. This engine screams like a rooster. In other words, it was extremely loud. Second, it's a combustion engine. Unlike the battery models, the machine has to intake an exhaust gas, thus limiting his stealth to just below the water surface level. Harrowingly, if it intakes so much as a little liquid, the machine is dead. And in the middle of a freezing ocean, a dead engine is a death sentence. But even so, he persevered. After months of rigorously testing his machine in public lakes, risking his cover under the watchful eye of the Stasi, the machine was finally complete. He was ready to escape. On July 14, 1967, he headed to the rocky cliffs of Boltenhagen, the last stretch of coast where the GDR allowed the public to vacation. At 11 p.m., with the machine on his back, he crept toward the surf. Freedom was just meters away. When suddenly, he heard a ruffle behind his back. Two border guards, with guns pointed at him, emerged from the shadows. The dream ended instantly. The escape was a total failure. Bernd was charged with the crime of desertion. He openly lied, claiming that his invention was for revolutionizing water rescue, but the judge didn't care. They gave him an 8-month sentence and confiscated his invention. His months of work gone instantly. He spent the next 8 months staring at the cold, dark prison wall in silence. The guards thought he was broken. They were mistaken. You see, Bernd wasn't just blankly staring at the wall. He was already redesigning the Rooster in his head. Upon his release, he knew he was now under the strict surveillance of the Stasi. If he gets caught escaping again, it's not prison anymore, but a bullet to his head. He realized he cannot give away his position anymore. He needed to disappear completely. So, he took a new Ingenious engine, but this time, instead of directly leading the exhaust to a snorkel, he connected it to a rubber ball and a tank chamber. So, what is it that he had? A sound killer. Yes, a silencer. It works like this. The sound waves from the piston pumps travel to the rubber, which absorbs much of the energy. The remaining waves then goes into the tank, trapping what is left. And with that, the Rooster was now a fish. He was ready for round 2. September 8, 1968. Graal-Müritz, East Germany. The air was biting, the waves were aggressive, and most important, there were no patrol guards to be seen. It was now or never. At around 10 p.m., Bernd ran toward the shore, never looking back. The escape was on. For hours, the light behind him became smaller and smaller until the whole surrounding became total darkness. Alone in this freezing void, Bernd held dearly to his machine, giving it all of his trust. His only navigation, an old compass, and the stars. 2 hours in, a roar shattered the silence. A searchlight. An East German patrol boat, and it was heading straight for him. He immediately killed the engine and closed his eyes, waiting for the bullet. But nothing. The ship's hull groaned as it passed just meters above him. But when the ship disappeared, he had a sudden realization. This was his first time stalling the engine in the middle of the water, and he had no idea if the engine will even restart. He struck the starter. It sputtered, coughed, and then hummed to life. The fish did not betray him. For 4 more hours, fighting hypothermia and extreme exhaustion, he pushed through. Then, a light. At around 4 a.m., he reached the Gedser Rev, a Danish lighthouse ship. Against all the odds, he had reached the other side. He was finally free. Now, Bernd might have crossed the physical barrier of the wall, but could a man ever truly outrun the Iron Curtain? Bernd Böttger became an instant celebrity in the West. Newspapers called his escape the greatest escape of 1968. He then got hired by a company who helped him develop his invention to its full maturity and named it Aqua Scooter. 3 years in, life was good. Bernd bought a new home and a yacht to sail around the world. But true freedom was short-lived. On August 27, 1972, Bernd and his newly met friends went to the Spanish coast of Rosas to dive. Bernd dived first, and when his friends followed him, they didn't find the lively guy they knew. They found a lifeless body. At the young age of 32, Bernd has passed. While his death was officially ruled as suffocation, suspicious circumstances, such as the sudden disappearance of one of his friends and his unusual drowning despite being a good swimmer, led to the belief that the Stasi was connected. They denied it, of course. For decades, before the arrival of lighter lithium battery models, Aqua scooters could be found all over the world. But it wasn't used for escaping. It was used for search and rescue. The very machine he built to flee was a tool used by lifeguards and coastguards to pull missing and drowning victims. Bernd's life might have been cut short, but part of him lived on. The clunky submarine that once hid from an oppressive government grew to be the light that found people in the dark. So, that is it. The mystery of the greatest escape of 1968. A story of how a wall, tainted with blood, faced a man with nothing but his ingenuity and unbreakable spirit to break free. Chased by a shadow, he slipped across the sea and vanished into freedom. A freedom, however brief it was finally his. If you don't want to miss our next bizarre mystery, you can join us by hitting that button down below. In the meantime, feel free to check our dusty library, brimming with strange and unbelievable stories. And as always, stay curious.